After Port Pyrobel was seized by the Chupacabras, they spent some time repairing their forces, and I mean, it took some time. After that one battle, the Chupacabras lost 3 mechs and sustained an aggregated 20 points of armor damage, 8 points of structure damage, and 6 critical systems destroyed. So that took up a majority of their strategic actions and time for the Chupacabras, a resource that they didn't have much of. In fact, let's take a look at the operational picture for the Chupacabras. Their mission is to destroy the 3 starports on the asteroid. Thus far, they have captured 2 still operational starports. The third was still very much under the control of the Vesper Marches. Now, the Chupacabras' attack force was built around the idea of a raid. Hit fast with mechs, destroy starports with infantry, and abandon the asteroid before the Vesper Marches can respond. To accomplish this, back in July, the Alien and Mercantile League ran a disinformation campaign to trick the Vesper Marches into believing this was an all-out invasion. But the channel's notable nobles didn't take the bait. Instead, they selected a fast-deploying proportional response to defend Archer Sierra, which is Task Force Black Sheep. And now that task force is fully deployed, and they adopted a turtle-up strategy with Port Reaverwall at their defensive center. Which is a bummer for the Chupacabras, because Port Reaverwall is their final objective. I am not going to mince words here. The Chupacabra player realized they had close to a 0 chance of accomplishing their goal now. In order to be successful, the Chupacabras will need to punch through the task force all the way to the enemy center and destroy the starport right from under the nose of their enemy. Let's not forget, in warfare the defenders usually have an advantage, so to be successful, the attacker generally needs more forces. But in this conflict, the defender slightly outnumbers the attacker, and they have a pool of reinforcements from the planet below. Under normal circumstances, the Chupacabra commander would hunker down and request reinforcements, or even consider abandoning the campaign. But this is a raid. There are no reinforcements on the way. Plus, if he completes his objectives, he gets a free giant cookie cake in real life, so he has to try. But where to attack? If he attacks Ashwin and breaks through, the enemy could reposition their defenses at Trapperthorn Junction and prevent the Chupacabras to get to Port Reaverwall. The same could happen if the Chupacabras attack Harkenlet. The enemy could easily reposition their defenses at Devil Bluff. The Chupacabras could attack Sandy Steel. If they broke through, the next natural location the Allies would fall back to is the starport itself. Maybe then the Chupacabras would have a chance to take their objective. Unfortunately, the Allies have the majority of their defenses there due to its proximity to Port Pyrobel, which makes it the most likely avenue of approach for the Chupacabras. But then there's Silverfield. Just like Sandy Steel, it is a hop, skip, and a jump away from Port Reaverwall. But since it has a longer logistics route, Silverfield is the least likely route the Chupacabras would take. Or at least, that is how it appeared to the Allies. Which is exactly why the Chupacabras have decided to attack there. Now, recall that the Chupacabras' financially acquired ally had set up a security monitoring station in Thaumadrift. Plus, he has spies. Unfortunately, one was captured in Harkenlet after successfully sabotaging a mech and destroying it. But I digress. But what I want to point out is that the Chupacabra player can see exactly how the Allies have deployed their forces. The Allies, on the other hand, can't see beyond their defenses, so they are blind to what is happening on the rest of the asteroid. Armed with this intel, the Chupacabras organized their forces. He destroyed Port Pyrobel and positioned his forces around Port Easteridge. Leaving a platoon of infantry to hold Thaumadrift and another platoon to hold Port Easteridge, the rest of his forces set off across the asteroid and massed around the junctions of Temperstowe and Pewter Kirk. All of this took several strategic turns, so you can imagine the Allies were starting to get anxious. But the Alliance wasn't sitting idle just waiting to be attacked. You may have noticed that the Alliance keeps receiving reinforcements from Roadside. Actually, both players are receiving various reinforcements, but they're all stuck on Roadside awaiting transportation. Only the Alliance player has the spare strategic actions to ferry those reinforcements to the asteroid. Now, these reinforcements are not in great shape. Most are arriving with armor and structure damage. I mean, it's no picnic down on Roadside. There is a civil war going on down there. While the Alliance player is bringing them up to the asteroid, repairing them with his own resources, and sending them to hold his perimeter while he pulls his own forces back to his center. But finally, from the fog of war, the Chupacabras attacked with their 1st and 2nd Mech Company at Silverfield. The Allies arranged their forces, but they did not send reinforcements to Silverfield because they were concerned of a 2-pronged attack. But more on that later. This is the Battle of Silverfield. Welcome to Silverfield. This settlement was a precious metals extraction base, and like all of Archer Sierra, this settlement is completely abandoned by civilians. However, it is being defended by a hodgepodge of allies of the Vesper Marches. As I mentioned earlier, the Alliance player is ferrying reinforcements from the surface, repairing them, and deploying them to his perimeter. And when the players receive reinforcements, I ask them to name each of the new units, which was probably a bad idea. Let me present to you Papa Popinski's Power Squad. It is comprised of 2 Mad Cats and a pair of Warhammers. All have a skill of 4. The Alliance has another mercenary lance defending this settlement as well, which he named Rise, Shine, and Dominate. It is comprised of 2 Wasps, a Javelin, and a Firefly. All are skilled 4. Also defending this settlement is Del Guard's 1st Armors Company 3rd Light Armor Lance, comprised of 2 Galleon tanks, which are the same tanks that fought in the last battle. They were garrisoned here because the Alliance player thought this was not a likely place to be attacked. But it seems trouble follows these guys wherever they go. Also defending here is 1st Armor's 2nd Medium Battle Lance, which has 2 Hetzers and 2 Bulldog medium tanks. The Chupacabras are attacking with their 1st and 2nd Mech Company again, but there were a few roster changes to replace the downed mechs. The 1st Heavy Battle Lance of the 1st Mech Company has a Highlander, Blood Asp, Grizzly, and a Warhawk. The 2nd and 3rd Medium Battle Lances are both comprised of a Marauder, Rifleman, and 2 Centurions. The 2nd Mech Company has also been fully repaired. The 1st Lance has a Charger and 2 Grasshoppers. Unfortunately, one of the Grasshoppers were destroyed in a previous battle and has been replaced with a Firestarter mech from the Reserve Company. The 2nd Lance has a Devastator, a Kraken, and a Quick Draw. And the destroyed Banshee was replaced by a Mighty Jenner from the Reserve Company. And that was sarcasm, by the way. The 3rd Lance has a Fenris, Panther, and a Jenner, and the Locust 2C was replaced by a Locust 3 Delta. The attackers are deploying along the northern edge. The defenders are deploying along the southern sector of the map. Now, to add some spice, if the attackers want to push past the defenders, they can exit to the southeastern corner of the map and continue their assault towards the starport. But the Chupacabra player has already confided in me that he plans to take over this settlement, so he can establish his HQ unit and make repairs. The Alliance, which is completely comprised of roadside forces, do not know if the Chupacabra's aim is to overrun the map to the southeast or just take the map in general. So they need to be prepared for both. If they wish to retreat, they can do it to the southeast or towards the southern edge. But the Alliance player said that his roadside forces don't even know what retreat means. But before these guys start destroying mechs, I want to give a special thank you to all the Patreon members for helping us keep the motivation and the coffee flowing. We would also like to notify you in a noticeable notice of 2 new notable nobles of noteworthy note, Bjorn and Urban. Thank you for supporting the channel. Okay, let's get into turn 1. The Alliance deployed their forces as such. The Galleon tanks were deployed behind the building, keeping an eye on their left flank. The Power Squad was holding the center. Rise, Shine, and Dominate were tucked in behind a rock formation, and the Medium Battle Armor Lance was lined up on the right flank. If you look at their deployment from above, you can see that the player deployed his forces to protect the route to the starport. This is likely why his left flank seems so open and unprotected. The Alliance has the initiative, so the Chupacabras will move and shoot first. Seeing that the left flank for the Alliance is lightly defended, the Chupacabra player activates his Blue Marauder Lance and ground moves onto the battlefield. The Alliance activates his Galleon Tank Lance and ground moves towards the enemy, ducking into cover behind those buildings. His hope is that the Chupacabras will not waste their shooting on these tiny tanks. But that hope was shattered because the Chupacabras activate the Red Marauder Lance and ground moves directly towards the Galleon tanks. Activation returns to the Alliance, and they select their Medium Armor Lance to advance up the flank and cover behind the processing building. For proportional movement, the Chupacabras will need to move 2 lances. They activate the Blood Asp Lance and ground move in behind the Red Marauder Lance. Things are looking pretty menacing on the left flank. I mean, that's a lot of stacked up firepower. Continuing his activation, the Chupacabra ground moves his second heavy lance of his second mech company, led by the brave Yellow Jenner, onto the battlefield. Most of the lance takes cover behind that building. It's the Alliance turn to activate, and he selects his power squad, who ground moves forward into cover. They are being careful to use terrain to block line of sight from the Chupacabras, developing on the right flank. For proportional movement, the Chupacabras will need to activate their last two lances. First, the Charger Lance ground moves forward, trying to bring as many weapons to bear on the Alliance's meager forces. The third Light Battle Lance is the last lance for the Chupacabras, who ground moves as far as they can into the Alliance's left flank. The Panther sprints to keep up with the rest of his lance. The Alliance can now activate his last lance, Rise, Shine, and Dominate, and he gets a little fancy with his maneuvers. First, the Firefly, which is not very fast nor has good jump jets, ground moves into cover with a pair of Warhammers. The Javelin jumps across the map to the top of the processing plant. He is exposed up there, but he is hoping that the combination of his TMM and range will keep him safe. And finally, the pair of Wasps jump danger close in proximity of the enemy. Using the building to block line of sight, they line up their sights on the Firestarter. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. Now, if you thought the Alliance player was being a little too aggressive and crazy, then you're not the only one, because I did too. But after the game, he explained his reasoning, and I'll explain it to you now so you can see the method to his madness. You see, the notable nobles gathered intel back in July and August on the attacking force, so the player knew the Chupacabras only had 2 mech companies for his attacks. And since the Chupacabras haven't been using their dropships much, he figured he didn't have many reinforcements, if any, from roadside. Earlier, the Alliance player was concerned about a 2-prong attack, but now that he sees both the Chupacabra mech companies at this battlefield, he knew that he was no longer in danger elsewhere on the asteroid. Also, the Chupacabras have replaced downed heavy mechs with light mechs from his reserve. I mean, who puts a Jenner in a heavy battle lance? That was a tall tale sign that the Chupacabras were already hurting. So if the Alliance can continue to pick off Chupacabra mechs, he will have the advantage once he can gather up his forces to fight against the Chupacabras. We'll see if that idea pays off over the long run. Again, the Chupacabras will shoot first, and they start with their light battle lance, who takes aim at the Galleon tanks. Target number is 7 for the Jenner and Fenris, since they are at close range, and a 9 for the Locust at medium range. And they all hit, dealing a total of 6 damage, which was enough to destroy the tank, but it will be able to return fire this turn. It turns out that line of sight is a big problem for the Chupacabras, so what mechs could see the blue Mad Cat open fire? The target number ranged from a 9 to a 10. Using lucky points, the Blood Asp, the Rifleman, and the Red Marauder hit, dealing a total of 10 damage. This wiped out all the armor and dealt 2 structure points. But it only caused 1 critical damage and the player rolled a 5, so no critical damage sustained. And oh yeah, the building was blown up by all that firepower. The Charger, Kraken, and the 2 red Grasshoppers took aim at the Red Warhammer in cover. The target number was 8, and only the Kraken missed. The rest hit, dealing 10 points of damage to the mech. This wiped out the Warhammer's armor and dealt 3 structure points. This only required 1 critical damage check though, and it was an 8. Weapon destroyed. Next, the Jenner, who had lined up sight on the purple Warhammer, opened fire and completely missed with snake eyes. Next, the Firestarter ignited the Red Wasp with a target number of 8. It hit, dealing 3 damage and causing 1 heat to the Wasp. This also caused critical damage to the movement of the Wasp. A flamethrower. That's one way to use oxygen in space, I guess. And finally, the Devastator and Quick Draw opened fire on one of the Hetzers. The target number is an 8, and unfortunately, both mechs missed. The Alliance can now return fire, and you may have noticed earlier, these Mad Cats have some sweet damage output. This is why the player named this lance Papa Popinski's Power Squad, because, and I quote the player, Papa Popinski's got the power. Then he started singing I've Got the Power by Snap. You know the song. Anyway, back to the battle report. The blue Mad Cat and the Javelin take aim at the Rifleman in the front lines. Target number for the Javelin was a 9 since he had jumped and is at medium range. The Mad Cat's target number was a 7. Using lucky points, they both hit, dealing 10 points of damage, taking out the Rifleman. The 2 Galleon tanks returned fire at the Locust. Target number was a 9 since the Locust was just at medium range. Both tanks hit, dealing 2 damage to the Locust. This also caused critical damage to the Locust's engine. Next, the Hetzer tank returns fire at the Devastator. The target number was a 7, and he hit the Devastator with a 12. This caused automatic critical damage, and he rolled a 6, weapon damaged. The 2 Wasps and 2 Warhammers take aim at the Firestarter. Because they're at medium range, the target number for the Warhammers was 8. The Wasps are at short range, but they had jump, so their target number is also an 8. The Warhammers and one of the Wasps hit, dealing 8 damage, which was enough to take out the Firestarter. The purple Mad Cat and Firefly didn't have line of sight, so they couldn't open fire, and this brings the shooting phase to a close. The Alliance lost a Galleon tank and has 2 severely damaged mechs. However, the Chupacabras lost 2 mechs and a Locust is in pretty bad shape. So far, I think the Alliance has been very lucky. I don't think that will last much longer. Let's get into turn 2. So that's a lot of tonnage of mech bearing down on these meager defenders. Before the battle, the player had joked about his forces not knowing the meaning of retreat. But after seeing the Chupacabras fully deployed on the battlefield, the player had a change of heart. Sort of. The Alliance player still wants to keep trying to take out as many Chupacabra light mechs that he can as he gives ground. This, as he calls it, is his nickel and dime strategy. The Chupacabras won initiative, so the Alliance will need to move and shoot first. Let's see how this nickel and dime strategy goes. First, the Alliance activates the Lonely Galleon tank, and he ground moves into cover, trying to cover this little gap in the terrain. For proportional movement, the Chupacabras must move 3 lances. He activates his entire first mech company and does a general advance on the settlement. The Red Marauder Lance ground moves into cover of the rock formation and buildings. The Blood Asp Lance, a little bit more confident in their mech's armor, ground moves toward the Mad Cats. The Blue Marauder's Lance is a bit more cautious, but they volunteer to stay in the rear to guard the rear arc of the company, just in case those light mechs try to be cheeky and jump in behind the first mech company. The Alliance can now activate a unit, and the player selects his medium armor lance, who was extremely lucky last turn. The player moves his lance back, still holding the route to the starport. The Chupacabras can now activate. The forces are now proportional in size, so they only activate 1 lance for movement. The aggressive behavior of the Alliance's Rise, Shine, and Dominate lance has for some reason made the Chupacabras concerned for the rear arcs of their mechs, and he's afraid that it's going to get exploited. So he moves his 2 Grasshoppers back to cover the rear arcs of his advancing mechs. The Charger ground moves into cover, lining up his sights on the Alliance's Mad Cats and Warhammers. The Alliance player can now activate a lance, and he selects his Rise, Shine, and Dominate lance. The Javelin jumps from the top of the building into cover behind the small observation tower on top of that rock formation. The Firefly ducks under the rail line and scoots into cover behind that building. The 2 Wasps make one of these faces at the Chupacabras and jumps into cover behind this building. The Chupacabras activate their Devastator lance. The itty-bitty juggernaut wannabe Jenner jumps into cover right in front of the Warhammers. The mech warrior is either brave or insane. The rest of the lance follows the Jenner right into the center of the map. It appears the Chupacabras are just going to ignore the Alliance tanks holding the route to the starport and focus on overwhelming the defenders in the center of the map. The Alliance can activate their last lance, the Power Squad, and the player has started to grow attached to the unit. He was originally just going to let them fight to the death on this map, but he has changed his mind. He wants to preserve the unit and use them in upcoming battles, because, and these are his words, Papa Popinski brings the pain. He then said he wants to rename the lance to Papa Popinski's Pain Squad. Did you hear that? That was the sound of me rolling my eyes and shaking my head. The heavily damaged Blue Mad Cat sprints into cover behind the rock formations, hopefully blocking line of sight. The Purple Mad Cat moves into cover. The Red Warhammer has also taken a beating, and he sprints into cover behind the processing facility. The Purple Warhammer ground moves back, and he is using the elevated rail support as cover. The Chupacabras activate their last lance, their light lance. So the Blue Mad Cat may have thought he was safe, but the Fenris is chasing him down. The Panther ground moves to break line of sight with the rock formations while lining up his sights on the Javelin. The Jenner joins the Panther while the Locust, with its banged up engine, retreats from the battlefield. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The Alliance will shoot first. Realizing that his Blue Mad Cat is likely toast, the player still wants to get retribution on the Fenris. The Javelin, Purple Mad Cat, and the Firefly open fire on the Fenris, and the Fenris had no cover. The Javelin missed, but the Mad Cat and Firefly both hit, dealing 10 damage, which was enough to take out the Fenris, but he will still be able to shoot back this turn. The Alliance continued their shooting, trying to inflict as much damage as they could on the Chupacabras. The Warhammer and the Red Wasp fired at the Blood Asp. The Warhammer had a target number of 7 and the Wasp was a 9. Despite using lucky points, only the Warhammer hit, dealing 3 damage to the armor of the Blood Asp. The Blue Wasp fired at the Devastator with a target number of 9, but it missed. And it turns out that the medium armor Lance had line of sight on the Charger. They rotate their turrets and open fire. Target number was an 8, and 1 Hetzer and 1 Bulldog hit, dealing 4 damage to the Charger. This removed the armor and damaged the structure, causing critical damage to the mech's fire control. The Galleon tank and the 2 mechs that sprinted cannot fire this turn. The Chupacabras can now return fire. Of course, the Fenris, with its last dying action, fired at the Blue Mad Cat with a target number of 7, and the Fenris hit, dealing 3 damage, which was enough to take the mech down. Both mechs were destroyed. The Chupacabra player simply nodded and said, "Totally worth it." The Charger returned fire at one of the Hetzer tanks with a target number of 8. The Charger found his target, dealing 2 damage to the Hetzer's armor, but the little Hetzer passed its motive check. The Red Marauder and the Grizzly had line of sight on the Firefly and opened fire with a target number of 10. Unfortunately, they both rolled 9s and the building was obliterated. That's the second building they destroyed, and I thought they were trying to capture this place. The Devastator, Quick Draw, and Kraken opened fire on the Blue Wasp with a target number of 10, and they all missed. And the Mech Warrior of the Blue Wasp made this face again. And last but not least, the Blood Asp, Warhawk, and the Highlander opened fire on the Purple Warhammer with a target number of 8. The Blood Asp and Highlander opt to overheat to do 2 additional damage to their shooting. They all hit, dealing a total of 18 damage to the Warhammer, destroying it where it stood. With shooting complete, turn 2 comes to a close. The Chupacabras lost a mech, but they were able to take out a Mad Cat and a Warhammer. Turn 3 basically became a total rout of the Alliance forces. The medium tank Lance headed southeast towards the starport, and remnants of the 2 mech Lances broke off to the south, with the Galleon tank following them. The Chupacabras lost a total of 3 mechs, and the Alliance lost 2 mechs and 1 Galleon tank. Both sides sustained quite a bit of damage as well. That will cost resources and time for both sides to repair. However, time is on the side of the Alliance. Time is a precious resource for the Chupacabras. The Alliance player has used the same strategy for this battle and the last one. Nickel and dime the Chupacabras and then run away as quickly as possible. So far, the Chupacabras have not had much determined resistance from the Alliance, but I know the Alliance player is cooking up a counterattack. So we'll see if this nickel and dime strategy will pay off for the Alliance or not. I hope you enjoyed the battle report. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next battle.